I mean, I want to say right now before I forget that I love old age. Old age agrees with me at this point. I mean, I've been through so many trials and tribulations about my identity that I'm very firm in my identity now.
We're going to start somewhere and we're going to end somewhere, and the middle is completely open. So how's that for a plan?
Sure.
Okay. Tell me your name and your age and...
Okay. My name is Gene Fedorko. I'm 72 years old. And what else?
Where were you born? Tell me a little bit about your childhood.
Okay, all right, okay. So I was born in an ethnic enclave in western Pennsylvania. My grandparents all came over from Eastern Europe to work in the steel mills. I was born in 1943, and after I was conceived, my father went to Europe to fight the Nazis in Belgium, right? My father and mother met. They were not married, and she went to say goodbye to him in Bastrop, Texas, at the Army base there. And I was conceived in Bastrop, Texas. Not many people in Manhattan know this, but yes, that happened. So I didn't meet him until like 4 or 5 years later, until he came home from the war. I grew up with my mother, who worked in the steel mills, because women did that in those years. And we were like the best friends, and she took me to the shore and the swimming pool. We hung out every day together because I was the only child at that point. I remember then when my father did come home from the war, there was like an immediate tension in the house. I always got the feeling that I never thought he was too fond of me for some reason. And I resented it, and it made me angry. And I often wondered, did he see something in me that, because this later was a theme that was to develop, that I was never, ever going to become the person that my father had plans for becoming, right? Still, I have a sense that I was very, very happy. And my father became a workaholic, so he wasn't around much anyway. And then I remember taking a lot of vacations with my mom to the Jersey Shore, and there was still that beautiful relationship, which continued until the day that she died, you know. But Dad was difficult. My mother enrolled me in a Catholic school with nuns, and I went to church a lot when I was young. It was theater. It was lovely. I was very fortunate. I didn't have any sexual encounters with the priests or anything like that. There was none of that stuff. The whole thing was a very, very dignified event for me. And I liked the nuns. I'm one of the few people that I know that had a really good experience with the nuns.
Do you have any recollection of what kind of teachings you got around sexuality when you were a kid?
In the Catholic school?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Like immediately you got the impression that sex was bad and that you shouldn't have impure thoughts, and it was a sin, and you should go to confession if you had impure thoughts. And this was like drummed into us from like as soon as I could remember. A funny thing happened. I was thinking about this. In the second grade, okay, we had a nun, of course, and she was out of the classroom for whatever reason. And I had an erection. And I took my erection out in all innocence. And like all the boys and all the girls came around, and they were like looking at, they called me Eugene. Oh, look at you, come on, look at Eugene, look. And it was done in just, there was like nothing grotesque or tawdry about it. It was pure innocence. And then somebody said, oh, sister's coming. Like the nun was coming back from wherever she was, right? And everybody went to their seats, and I put my boner away. And the interesting thing was that no one ever squealed or talked about it or freaked out about it. And we were in the second grade. It's like, 7 years old, 7 or 8 years old. And it was kind of an innocence among children, and a curiosity, a neurotic curiosity or whatever curiosity. But we knew enough, even at that age, that, oh boy, you better not tell sister. Don't tell the adults, because there'll be consequences, you know. When it did, when I became sexually aware, like around 7th, 8th, ninth grade, that's when all of those negative teachings by the church really impounded on me, and I felt enormous guilt then for masturbating. Not so much for masturbating. Oh, here's another thing that happened. Oh, wow. When I was like in about the 6th or 7th grade, puberty was just starting to, I think, form in me. There was a guy that lived up the block. I think his name was Russell, and maybe he was 16 years old, maybe I was 10 or 11 or 12 or something. And we went behind the old tool shed, and Russell pulled down his pants and asked me to play with his dick. And I did, and I was fascinated, and it was so beautiful. And he had such a beautiful dick, and he had such beautiful, like, pubic hair, and then the whole thing. And then there was no orgasm or anything, you know. And after a while, he just zipped his pants up again. And I'm not even sure I must have seen him again in the neighborhood, but nothing was ever referred to in that. And that was a beautiful, innocent experience.
You don't recall any kind of feelings of shame or fear of God?
No, not with that one. Oh. Not with that one. No, that was so beautiful that it was devoid of any kind of a judgmental kind of thing. It was very, very pleasant. Yeah.
That's lovely.
It is. It was, yeah. But it was when I became sexually aware. It was like especially the 8th grade, certainly the 9th grade. The guilt started to kick in because I started to identify those feelings as like what the nuns and the priests and my parents and the institutions were telling me were bad, you know. And then, of course, at the time, there was no internet. There was no reference. I spent a lot of time with my Polish grandparents in their house. And my grandfather, he drank a lot. He was very kind to me. But he had a bookcase. Of course, I found the key. The bookcase was locked. And one of the books in the bookcase was Richard von Krafft-Ebing's Sexualis Psychopathia, kind of an encyclopedia of weirdos, of like guys who would become erotically stimulated if they saw a man on a horse with one leg or something, or an amputee with 2 crutches. And there was a homosexual aspect to it as well as a heterosexual aspect to it. And I realized later on that that was the porn that I grew up with, was Krafft-Ebing. And I thought, oh, wow, that's interesting that there's such a wide breadth of sexuality in this world. I had, at that point, started to perceive my own proclivities and I started to realize that they were not in conjunction with the compulsory heterosexuality of the time.
Were you at all a sissy, or how were you a popular kid? Were you a shy kid? Where were you in that kind of?
No, I was popular. I was always kind of like happy-go-lucky. People liked me. I don't think I was a sissy. I wouldn't call this being sissified, but then, like around those years, my father started to try to teach me sports, and I was never any good at sports. I adore baseball this day. I'm a rabid New York Yankee fan, but I could not play it at the time. And I remember my father, it was like really, he had this very negative judgment about that.
And where was God and where was the church in your high school period?
Oh, God, okay. Up until like the 8th grade, I was very religious and I loved going to church. It was like the best show in town. Like all these altars and flowers and, the costumes, the pageantry was just sublime. I was fascinated with all that. And then when I started to become aware of my sexual internals, I started to become not so much interested in religion anymore.
Did you know that gay people existed? Do you know that homosexuality existed?
No, not at all, not one bit. Maybe there's like a vague reference from Krafft-Ebing where a guy got interested, but I was too young to even conceptualize that, to use it in a resourceful way to apply to my own. There was just a lot of confusion. like around the 8th grade, I tried to make a play at other guys, and they just shunned it, okay? They just turned my advances away. Whatever I did, like grab their dick or whatever, you know.
Wow, that's bold.
And I thought, well, gee, they're not interested. Like, I have this huge interest in, like, other males and playing around with their dicks and everything. And why is it that other males don't have that interest in me, you know? And that really bewildered me. And there was shames. Yeah, I started to feel like an outsider at that point. I remember one time, it was the 8th grade, I know, I went to the movies with David, I won't mention his last name, and I reached my hand over and started playing with his dick. He just very gently took his hand, my hand away and moved it away, you know. No admonishment or anything, but it did leave me feeling like, my God, why? Why is there this disparity?
Did you see them or hear them talking about their interest in girls, and did that feel...
That started to happen, yeah. And then when that started to happen, I was like, I started to examine my own feelings about girls/women, and I was like, boy, I really am different, because they would have the same feelings about girls, and they would talk about girls' tits, and a girl's ass, and a girl's panties, the way I fetishized, if you will, like a guy's like boxer shorts or his dick or his ass, or, you know. And I thought, there's a big divide there. What's going on?
Did that impact your overall kind of sense of safety or comfort in the world?
Oh my God, yes. There was this kid in my neighborhood, Kenny Yablonsky, who I know the guys would talk about. They would take him in the alley and make him go down on them, right? And then they would beat the shit out of him. And I would see Kenny walking around the back alleys with black eyes. So at that point, I knew that, oh my God, I better not like try to touch any of these guys anymore, because they're going to do to me what they did to Kenny Yablonsky. And I was terrified. As I went through high school, this disparity between me and the rest of the guys just magnified. And by the time you get to 10th grade, you know, guys are already like putting their hands down a woman's panties, and they'd come to school the next day and they'd talk about, you know, feeling a woman up. And I was like, oh boy, I better not say anything about what I'm thinking, which is I'd like to get into the guy's pants that way. And it was really oppressive, and it was really, really confusing. And of course, none of it at that point felt like I didn't think that I had the right to feel legitimate about my sexual inclinations. And then to complicate it more, around the 9th grade, I started going to the Y, swimming, and everybody swam nude in those days. And it was so luscious erotically for me. And one time I went to the Y, and there was this guy that I was attracted to, and I kept going under the water and like kissing his dick, right? And again, he was very gentle about the whole thing. After the second time, he said, no, don't do that. And that's all. It was not like, you know, I'm going to beat the shit out of you kind of thing. But still, you know, again, it was one of those things where, gee whiz, like everybody else is getting their nookie, and I can't get mine. I just have this sense of frustration, danger.
Something in you had some capacity to assess at least a limited degree of safety in that situation. I mean, these things are so interesting to me.
I don't know. Well, maybe I do know. Okay. This guy in particular, who I found very attractive, he was older than I was, and he was very friendly. And we had established like a little bit of banter or something. So I thought he might be a safe bet. But he was safe in the sense that he didn't pummel me, but it was not a successful ploy. Also around that time, maybe this was like probably before 10th grade, right before 10th grade, this summer, I went to the movies, and this guy came and he sat down next to me. And he started to reach his hand over and to touch me. And I looked over and I thought, oh, this guy's like really, really cute. And I was interested, right? And he reached in, we were sitting in the back row. He unzipped my pants, pulled my dick out, and started playing with it. It felt great. Then he pulled his dick out, which was big. He had a big dick. And he put my hand on it. This is like the first hard-on I ever touched in the world, right? And we just sat there and like playing with each other for a long, pleasant time. I was terrified. I was scared. This was all new to me. And this was like a sex that, not everybody else was having, and that I thought maybe I shouldn't be having. He had a car. And after we played with each other for a while, he asked me if I wanted to go for a ride. And even though I was attracted to him, some kind of self-preservation thing in me that, I'm not going to go with a stranger someplace that is doing like weird sex because I already identified homosexuality as weird. I didn't want to take the chance and do that. And of course, I never saw him again. By the time I was a senior in high school, it's a good thing I graduated that year, because towards the end of my senior year, it was starting to upset my peers, the guys, the straight guys. And a lot of them were making, the comments kept getting more and more hostile. Every time someone made a reference to Eugene being a sissy or Eugene being queer, it would just fill me with the utmost anxiety and terror, just terror. There was no sanctuary. I had no place and no one to go to where I could safely discuss my confusion, my internals, my desires. I love the priests. I love Father Labby. But if I went to him with that there would be bad consequences. So I couldn't tell anybody. There were black kids in my neighborhood. There were a few Jewish kids in my neighborhood. And if you're black in a very racist society, you go home at night and get support for being black. If you're a Jewish kid in a very anti-Semitic society, you go home at night and with your family you get support for being Jewish. If you're a queer kid and you go home at night, your parents beat the shit out of you if they find out that you're gay, which is mine did when they found out.
Did you also simultaneously experience getting interested in things that the other boys weren't interested in? Did you start to have an early interest in artistic things or things like that were not conventionally male or heterosexual in those times?
I think so, because I went to as many movies as I could see, and I liked movie stars, and I liked the glamour of all of that. New York started to draw me. Something got in there, and I remember that like on one of the night talk shows, they started to make derogatory jokes about Fire Island. And I immediately got, okay, Fire Island is like full of gay people, homosexual people, and people like me. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I want to get to Fire Island someday. When I was a senior in high school, I was supposed to go to New York for my first time on my senior class trip. But I threw a banana peel at Mr. Schaefer, the English teacher, and this girl ratted on me, and my punishment was that I could not go to New York. And I was so disappointed because I really, really wanted to go. So I didn't get to New York until I was a freshman in college at Christmas break.
Do you recall when you started to get a sense that there might be a bigger group of people and there might actually be a name that was not a derogatory name?
Not a non-derogatory name, but the Fire Island jokes told me that there's something going on in New York. My freshman year in college, Penn State, when Christmas break came, I made an excuse with my parents. I told them I was staying with a friend in Long Island, which I did, but for only 2 days I stayed with Howie. And then I came into New York, and I checked my luggage in the Greyhound station, one of those lockers. And at this point, I knew that there was something in Greenwich Village. Greenwich Village was like the hangout. And I walked down Fifth Avenue from like the Greyhound station on 56th Street, right? I kept asking people, how far away is the village? How far away is the village? Right? They keep going. And I got to the village, and I met somebody I'll never forget, I was waiting to cross 6th Avenue and 8th Street, right? And this guy next to me, young blonde guy, right? Cruised me, let's go to a bar. We went to a bar, and then I went to his house in Washington Square area, and I stayed with him for a few days. And that was really wonderful in the sense that that was the first time that I had an open, long-term, more than once, more than sex with my shoes on, kind of a relationship with somebody. We slept together every night for, I think, 5 nights. His name was Charlie. He was an Italian guy. And we went to restaurants that were owned by, like, gay people. I was like, oh, my God. We went to this one shop that was owned by lesbians, right? And I was like, oh, my God. This is so wonderful. And bars where there were like all gay guys, you know. And I thought, I found this is what I've been looking for like 18 years, almost 18 years. I found my tribe, and I knew it would be here. And it was such a gratifying, wonderful feeling, yeah. But after that, I started coming to New York every summer. And every chance I get, because it was Penn State, I think it was like 5 hours away hitchhiking, and I'd come like for whatever, Easter break or whatever, you know, and I just started meeting people. And it was fascinating. Growing up in that small mill town, the class structure was pretty homogenous. We were all of the same class. So you got to New York, though, and you could sleep with poets one night, a sailor the next night, a rich person the next night, working class person the next night. There was this fluidity across class lines that was just fascinating. It opened up this whole kind of world to me. There was a freedom there. There was a liberation. There was a freedom of thought, of expression, of living outside the mainstream, having one's own opinions. And that was very, very, very attractive to me. I just loved that. I thought that was so good. One of my first boyfriends was this composer who had been Aaron Copland's lover. And, you know, here I am, this little kid from a mill town in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and people were coming over to dinner like Leonard Bernstein and Carlos Sournak, and we were invited that summer out to Edward Albee's house on Water Island, and I felt like I was coming into my own, but there was still like a lot of shame, guilt, confusion about my sexuality, even though I was starting to see positive examples about it all. And then, of course, living in New York at that time, even though I had my circle where I felt very, very comfortable of friends, right? And there was still this enormous prejudice against queers. So the outer world was not so safe at all at that time. I think it was Mayor Lindsay at the time, or Mayor Wagner. They started to crack down on the gay bars. And it became a point where if you went out drinking for the evening, you had to have $10 in your wallet, in your pocket. Because if the police raided the bar, the gay bar, and they did, and they took you off to jail, which they did, if you had the $10 to pay your bench fine, you were released. If you didn't have the $10, you had to spend the night in the hoochie. And it didn't matter to me so much as a young person, but the next day they would publish the names of the arrestees in the paper. And some of the arrestees would be married, they'd have family, they'd be a superintendent of schools in Larchmont or something, and their careers, their lives would just be ruined by being busted in a gay bar, you know, and taken in.
Did that ever happen to you? I mean, did you get busted?
One time, and I had the $10. But for the I was lucky. For the most part, I like to drink, so I would drink my drink into my $10, and you have a few drinks, and you don't care anymore, But the one time when I had the $10 and they let me go, it was not pleasant, but they let me go.
Did the Army come in at any point?
Yeah.
I mean,
oh God, yes. Okay, so I must have been home from college one summer. And I was inducted into the Army. got this letter.
Was this before Kennedy died or after
Before. I think it was 62. I had already been in New York, and I was already hanging out at the Living Theater, which was very radical at the time. Already there was a conversation going on that the United States throwing its weight around in Vietnam was morally questionable. So I already had enough messages about that from people around me. And it came time to go to the Army, and I was like, I'm not sure I want to do this, not for Vietnam. So I went, yet one had to go for induction, and I was seeing a shrink. But he was nice enough to write me a letter for induction saying that I was homosexual. So I had that as a, just in case I decided that I did not want to go to the Army. I was thinking, well, if they send me to Germany, because I've always wanted to go to Germany, that would be cute. I'll go to the Army. But if they're going to send me to what I already sensed was the carnage hole of Vietnam, I did not want to go. Well, I got to the induction center in Pittsburgh, right? And the culture was just seemed so hostile to me and so insensitive and so antithetical to anything I ever wanted to be involved with, right? That they gave you this questionnaire to fill out, and I checked 4F. Do you know what that is? If you're homosexual or have homosexual tendencies, you check 4F. And the word around the time was, oh, don't ever check 4F, because if you use that to get out of the Army, that's going to follow you around for the rest of your life, and you'll have that black mark on your record that you're homosexual and that you were rejected from the Army. Somehow I didn't give a shit about that. I checked 4F, right? And looking back on it, it was like the smartest thing. I might not be here today.
So you're officially named in United States government documents as a homosexual. So
Yep.
That's a pretty big step to take.
I didn't care at that point because I had already been to the top of the mountain, New York City, Greenwich Village, and I just didn't care. I knew this was what I wanted to do. I knew this was what the kind of I was with my tribe, and as long as I was with my tribe, I knew that things would be okay with my tribe. It was just that simple and visceral for me. Mm-hmm. There was still the negative message that we're getting from society, that we're getting from our institutions, the newspapers, that we were sick and that we were pathological. And you could forget about that sometimes. I could forget about it, but not really. In 1963, I was here for the summer and ran into my friend Jimmy Farrat, who's an activist, and he's still around. He started all these clubs like Danceteria. But anyway, Jimmy he's always been very political, and we hung out together a lot that summer. He gave me my first amphetamines, these things called hot cross buns, 10 benzodrines in a package. And we went out with these lesbians. We went to this bar in Hoboken. I loved amphetamines, But anyway, one day in 1963, he said, come on, honey, we're going to Washington, D.C. tomorrow. There's a march. And what kind of march? Oh, you'll see. Meet me in Union Square, and we get on this bus, right? And the bus, it's all black people. And the marshal that was on the bus said, okay, when we get to Washington, D.C., if you're attacked by the police or if you're attacked by counter-demonstrators, just get down on the ground, put your hands over your head if they start beating you, so you don't get your head split open and stuff. And I said to Jimmy, what the fuck are we getting into here, He goes, oh, don't worry, it'll be... So we got to D.C., got off the bus, and I never saw so many black people in my life coming down all these avenues, And it was festive, and there was a air, I'll never forget it, there was this air of moral authority and dignity. And we went to the Lincoln Memorial, and Jimmy, it was really hot that day, and Jimmy and I took our shoes off and rolled our pants legs up, and we stood in the reflecting pool to cool off. And the park rangers came over and said, get out of it, it's against the law, you have to get out of the pool. And I remember all these black people saying, leave those little white boys alone, those white boys aren't hurting anybody, And I had this sense of black people just being so friendly and benign and kind. And we stood there, and Odetta sang, and all these other big name people performed, and then Martin Luther King got up and he gave his "I Had a Dream" speech, and I'll never forget the cadence of that. I could start crying now. The way he just built up the cadence and the energy and the power of that speech to the very end, where he says, I've been to the mountaintop and I have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And everybody just burst into tears and applause and joy. And that radicalized me for the rest of my life. That was such a huge, important experience for me. And I didn't really have the words or the concepts even at that young age to understand what radical meant or radicalization meant. These things were just happening to me, and I thought they were wonderful, and I was absorbing them. When I bring things up that I haven't thought of in a long, long time, sometimes it's spontaneously, oh, I forgot about that. That's wonderful. How nice to remember that. And then there are the associate. Keep in mind, this whole time that I'm talking about, like pre-Stonewall, was all associated with confusion, terror, fear, not being certain of my identity. So it was a very, very painful time in my life, very painful. And I masqueraded a lot of that with drugs and alcohol. After the march, I moved in with the composer on East 58th Street in Sutton Place. And I started taking a lot of amphetamines. They were really easy to get back then. You could buy like 100 of them for like $20 or something on the black market. I just loved the stuff. And I got carried away on amphetamines. And the composer, John Kennedy, he was in L.A. visiting a friend. And I was here by myself in his apartment. And I started to experience blackouts, passing out. John came home from Los Angeles, and I was just about comatose. He called my parents, they came up to get me, and they put me in this mental hospital in Pittsburgh. And I went along with it. I didn't want to leave New York, but I knew that I was destroying myself here. The shrinks there, rather than focus on my really obvious amphetamine abuse, peyote abuse, marijuana, alcoholism, they focused on my sexuality, my homosexuality. It just seemed so medieval that they would miss such a huge aspect of my self-destruction and blame it all on my homosexuality.
Did you feel like that it was somehow related to your existing shame with your homosexuality?
Yes, sure, because all that stuff, those feelings were intolerable.
How did you pull yourself out of that? When you got
Well,
out
my
of it?
parents came and they took me home, right? And then when I, after the 3 weeks in St. Francis, I was living with them and I was like, oh man, did I ever fuck up? Because I really wanted to be in New York where I thrived spiritually, intellectually. And here I was back in Ambridge, Pennsylvania again, living with my parents. I started going into Pittsburgh and going to gay bars there, which I was very fluent in, met a whole bunch of people in Pittsburgh. And then I met probably what was like the wildest gay crowd in Pittsburgh at the time. This is 1964. And with that crowd, that wild crowd that I met in Pittsburgh, they had access to amphetamines, which I got involved with again. I couldn't find like a job in downtown Pittsburgh. My father would have me work for him at the grocery store, nepotism. And I hated that. I just hated being there. I felt like such a failure. And I had to get back to New York. I had to get back here because this was like my spiritual base, my cultural base. My tribe was here, you know. And at the time, there were these telephones, like we had 3 in our house. And if you picked up one of the phones, you could hear the conversation on whoever was on the other 2, you know. And my mom must have picked the phone up when I was talking to Dick, and she must have heard a catchphrase and then stayed on the phone. And she started getting very, very upset and screaming and getting hysterical. And hang up the phone and come down. I want to talk to you. How could you do this to us? The usual cliches. What did we do that you turned out this way? She was hysterical. She kept running to the bathroom to throw up. That's how hysterical she was. And I called my friend in Pittsburgh. I told him what was going on, right? And he said, look, you've got to get out of that house. Your mom's hysterical. It's not good for you to be there. Come up and stay with me. As I was going out the door to catch the bus to go up to Pittsburgh, right? It was August. The neighbors would all sit on the porch in the summertime and just watch whatever the cars go by, and they'd fan themselves, right? And my mom came, I'll never forget these words. They're etched into my mind like acid. My mom, who never swears or says damn or hell, she came out into the porch and she said, I know where you're going, you cocksucker. You're going up to Pittsburgh and you're going to suck each other off. And I was like, oh, why do we have to do it this way? Why do we have to take it this far? Now all the neighbors did know, of course, right? And I went up to Pittsburgh and I stayed with John for a few weeks. Years later, this was like in the mid-'80s, my mom was visiting here at this loft, right? And I thought, well, okay, enough decades have passed that I could bring that up to her and we could have a laugh about it. And she was furious. She goes, that's absolutely not true. How dare you? I hope you don't tell anybody else that story, because I never use language like that. I really genuinely think she did not remember because she was so hysterical and in an emotional blackout. I stayed with John and I was furious at my parents, just furious at my family for not accepting me, because I had already been to New York and I saw that being gay was possible. And I was furious at my parents for being so backward that they didn't get that.
And were you able to, at that point, defend yourself as a gay man? Were you that far along yet that you could? I'm
not sure. It was a very, very stressful, confusing, angry time for me. I think I screamed a lot.
But would you deny being gay, or would you say it's okay
absolutely
that I'm gay?
Not. Absolutely no denial whatsoever. No. And I mean, you could say from that point on that was it. There was no more closet for me after my mom found out. She listened to that phone call and called me a cocksucker. No more closet. I made the decision that I don't want to be here. And I made plans to move out to California, to LA, by myself. And I went home to pack a bag. And my mother was crying and upset, and I was packing my things and organizing myself. And my father came home from work, and they both came up to my room, and they started beating the shit out of me, both of them, okay? And my father's a big man, he's twice as big as me, and the three of us are rolling around on the floor, and like animals. And I remember what stopped the fight, I don't remember like who landed what blow, none of that. But I had a chunk of my mother's hair with a piece of scalp, bloody scalp on the end of it. And she had a hole in her scalp from where I pulled that hair out with the skin somehow. And the three of us looked at that and we were like, oh my God, what are we doing? What are we doing? Let's stop this, And we stopped the fight. And I went back to Pittsburgh, and I had to come home one more time. And my parents, my mom had gotten less hysterical, but not quite. And they knew I was coming, and Dad was there. And Dad lived through the Depression. He was very frugal and tight with money. But he said something to me that I'll never, ever, ever forget in my life. He opened up his wallet and he pulled out all these $20 bills, $500 worth of them, which is a lot of money in 1964. And for my father to part with like $5 was a big deal, but let alone 500, right? And he gave me the money and he said, look, and he started crying. He goes, look, I want you to know that you're my son and that no matter what happens, that my door is always open to you. And I think him saying that prevented me from killing myself and destroying myself. When I got to LA, I was so consumed by my own turmoils that I just drank and took drugs and drank and drank and drank and drank. And my mom would send me money. And like about the next summer, she came out to visit me with my father and two of my sisters and my brother. And the visit was all about, look, son, we love you, and we want you to come back to Pittsburgh, and you could live with us, finish school, finish college, and please come back. And I think I said I had to think about it because I was so upset. But I did eventually move back in with them. That's the kind of family I have, that no matter what huge differences and bloodbaths that we've had, that we would always come back to love. Yeah, I get exhausted every time I tell that story because the emotions there are just so deep that if I tell that story to a civilian, right, or a friend in my life, I usually go to bed right after that. I finish that story. You know? I'm not going to do that now, but because there's like plenty of other stuff to talk about as we go forward.
What'd you study?
I never did finish college. I don't have a credential in the world to bless myself with. When I moved back in with my family, my father got a job for me at the Beaver County Times, the newspaper. And I didn't want it. I didn't want any parts of my father's plan for me. I had my own little flat, drinking a lot, drugging a lot. And one time I was in this shithole of a gay bar on Penn Avenue, run by the mafia. And it was like right before Thanksgiving. And this guy comes in the door, blonde hair. He had a certain elan to him, definitely a certain confidence, and his name was John Kraitz, and he had just gotten back from Israel and Switzerland, which I thought was incredibly glamorous, you know. He came home with me, and he moved into my little apartment, and we became boyfriends, lovers, and he turned out to be the most important person in my life. And we were together, all told, 23 years after that. And he wanted to finish his degree at Penn State. So he said, look, I'm moving to State College. Do you want to come with me? And I was like, ugh. If you think Pittsburgh is bad, State College is going to be even thinner than that in terms of, you know, stimulation. And he said, come on. So I moved to State College with him while he got his degree. People would come to Penn State in those years, like Barbara Giddings, Franklin Kameny, like these Mattachine crowd people.
This is after Stonewall.
Before.
Before?
It was pre-Stonewall.
Uh-huh.
It was like maybe the year before that.
Wow.
Gay Revolution was in the air, right? And we would hear these people talk and, oh, I love to hear that message that gay is good. I loved hearing that. I needed that, you know. We had been going to New York a lot on weekends, and Stonewall happened in 1969. We were not there for Stonewall, but we heard about it, and we came up the next week and the next weekend. And already there were demonstrations and zaps and sit-ins, and GLF had started to form.
So what did it feel like for you? I mean, did it feel like a sea change? Tell me what that period...
Exuberant, because not only did I have my tribe here, and we were all having fun and enjoying ourselves, and there was a sense of power, empowerment now. Okay, we're not going to be quiet and just like have our little sex, you know, in some quiet bedroom and maybe have some shame and behind a closed door. Now we're out, we're walking down the street. There was a generational thing there too. They were really uptight about revealing any part of themselves that might be gay. And there was this whole thing about when Stonewall happened that don't rock the boat. We don't want to like ruin it for ourselves. And the rest of us, we were exuberant and rebellious, and we wanted to rock the boat. We wanted to sink the fucking ship. That's what we wanted to do, you know. And we had models before us of like black liberation and women's liberation had been going on. So it felt incredibly empowering. And you know what it felt like? It felt like, you know what, motherfuckers, we're not taking shit from any of you anymore. That's that. Fuck you people if you're going to give us a hard time. One time we were, I guess it was 1970, yeah. The year right after Stonewall, we were in D.C. for an anti-Vietnam War demonstration. And somebody said, there's a meeting of the APA, American Psychological Association, at the Omni Shoreham Hotel. And Franklin Kameny is going to have a zap there. Somebody let us in the back door of the Omni Shoreham, and there were a bunch of us, and there were perhaps 16 of us. We took the stage. The men were in black tie, the women were in gowns and, you know, sequins and all that shit. And they were stunned. Who are these? We looked like bums to them because we were hippies. And Franklin Kameny grabbed the microphone and basically told the plenary session of the APA that we are not going to accept your classification of homosexuality as pathology anymore. We are dignified, we love, we have careers, we have jobs, we have functional lives that we're proud of, and there's nothing pathological about it, and we're as good as you are. I remember like a lot of the shrinks, the men, were like standing up and they were outraged. But I remember the women, and whether they were shrinks or wives, they were standing up and they were making like all these Picasso faces, like, you bums, get out of here, get out, you know. And that was it. Our zap was over. We were not arrested or anything. And then the next year, 1972, the APA changed its classification formally. It was announced at the plenary session that they changed their classification of homosexuality from pathology. The language was now homosexuality is an acceptable alternative lifestyle. And that was huge for the revolution, the movement. We would visit New York City from Penn State, but when it came time to leave Penn State, State College, John and I moved to Provincetown. And Provincetown in 1973 was incredibly liberated. There was a sense of bacchanalia. There was an art community. There was an intellectual community. There was an outlaw community. We were hippies when we moved to Provincetown, and the zeitgeist of the time was to live outside the system. We would deal drugs, and when the season was over, we would get blotter acid, John and I, and put 40 drops. It comes 40 drops on like a piece of cigarette paper, and like you'd get 200 cigarette papers like this, and we'd mail them to ourselves at American Express in Berlin or American Express in Paris, go pick them up so we didn't have to go through customs. Then we'd sell the acid, like one dot at a time, for $5 a hit, and until the money ran out, and then we'd come back to Provincetown. The people that we were around, there were so many artists and free thinkers and creative people and destructive people and zany, brilliant, interesting people. They thrive in a community where there's cheap rents and a history of art. It was a really fertile time for me to come of age in a sense, and it was unforgettable, and it shaped me to who I am today. Now the only problem was that I had a creeping momentum of alcoholism and drug addiction going on, you know, and eventually I bottomed out on that, and we had this huge fight. Table pounding knockdown fight, like fuck you. And he moved to Paris. And this is before cell phones or the internet. We had no, because it was too expensive to call Paris on your landline, so we had no contact for 2 years. And then after 2 years, he came back to Provincetown, looked me up. He said, look, I just got back into the States. Can I stay with you for a few weeks until I get my own apartment? Yeah, sure. Yeah, it was good to see him, you know. And he moved in with me, and then that began the next 16 years of our relationship, where we were like this. And we were very, very close, but we had no sexual or relationship kind of needs from each other. And he moved to New York and somehow got his hands on this loft. And I moved here in, I guess it was 81 or 82. And we would have relationships here with other people. And there was never any jealousy. But at the end of the day, we'd sit down and we've had each other. And we were the most important persons in each other's life. And this is like post-Stonewall, post a lot of consciousness raising. I've started to feel very, very, very good about sex again. Very good about it. We had this saying in Pittsburgh that, oh, if you go to New York, it's great because the streets in New York are paved with erections, you know. So go there and walk on those streets. And it felt really, really good and all through the 80s.
But that's the height of the epidemic.
That's the height of the epidemic, but I was not sick. Okay.
But you weren't. There wasn't fear in that.
There was a fear, but first thing I moved to New York, had a friend up here from AA, and it was like my first few days here, and he said, "Oh, be careful. This is 81. Something's going around. Be careful. Don't come into contact with anybody's bodily fluids." So, okay. So to me, that meant, that just meant, you know, you don't swallow or get fucked or, and that was kind of like the general standard of precautions. It just, whatever sex I did have, I noticed that it was refreshingly not that sense of oppression or Catholic guilt or shame. But I think I was lucky enough to be well informed about the delineation of safe sex and risky sex. And I followed those guidelines. So within those guidelines, I felt liberated. John got AIDS eventually, you know, and died of AIDS. And I didn't because we were not sexual. But he used to always say when he was dying that, you know, honey, we should be on Oprah because we've really had a good run. We've had, you know, we had our cake basically, and we could eat it too. You know, we had like all this sex and romance that we wanted exclusive of each other. And at the end of the day, we have this relationship where we're both incredibly important to each other. John's family from Pittsburgh, they were more privileged than my working class family. His mother was very distant from him here in New York. She wanted him, like my father, to get married. She was always pushing for that. So when he got AIDS, she blamed me for giving him AIDS. And I tried to explain to her that, no, I'm HIV negative. And maybe she was in her emotional hysteria. She didn't understand that or get any of that. And she basically disappeared as he got sicker. And the deathbed was in the front of the loft there where the kitchen is now. And John would just sit on there for like a year and a half, and I'd come home from work. He'd be depressed. I'd have to hook him up to nutritional IV. It was just a nightmare, a horrible time. And finally he went to the hospital his last time. And I called Evelyn, his mother, and I said, look, your son's dying. And now is the time, it was like right before Christmas, and now is the time to come up and say goodbye, right? And she said, oh, well, I already have plane tickets to go to Detroit to visit my cousin, and I can't do anything for him there. The nurses will take care of him. And I'm thinking to myself, you rotten human being. You can't even come up to say goodbye to your son who's dying. And neither could the brother, the straight brother. And I went back to the hospital room with John, and I told him, oh, your mom's coming, and Eddie's coming, your brother's coming, they're coming. So I could not tell him what nightmares they were being, and they were just so indifferent about the whole thing. Yeah. And he died in my arms in St. Vincent's Hospital. And the next morning, it's so funny how these things work. There was this guy I knew in Provincetown that my best friend Gene used to fuck. And I had not seen him in like 23 years or something. And John died, and I just closed his eyes, right? And this guy, I forgot his name, Richard, he came like walking across the hall, and he looked in and recognized me. And he came into the room, and we said a few words, and he got a washcloth and rolled it up and put it under John's chin so John's chin would make, because you're like this when you know. And he did something else like to make John look more dignified, combed his hair a little bit. And then he left, and I never saw him again. And I always thought, my God, what an angel that was to be passing by the room that day. That how beautiful that was, that he helped me at that crucial moment of my life, because I was alone in the room with John at that time. Sure enough, I called the parents, called the brother, your son is dead, you know. The first question is, was there a will? We want to come up to New York, and we want to take this, that, and the sofa. And I said, yeah, there's a will. John left everything to me. I don't believe you. Send me a copy of that will. Fuck you people. So I Xeroxed the will, and I sent it down to them, and that shut that up, right? Because John did leave everything to me. I called my parents, and my mom said, look, honey, you come home. Daddy and I will take care of you for Christmas. So I went home, and my mom, God bless her, damn, she couldn't drive at night at this point in her life. She was, I guess, I forgot how old, but her night vision was lapsing, and she drove out to the airport to pick me up at night. And I thought that was so stunning and so loving of her. I'll never forget that. I was in Pittsburgh for a while. We had Christmas there, etc. And I noticed, I would read the Pittsburgh papers, and there was no mention of John Kraitz's death. His family didn't put anything in the paper. And I thought, oh, those sons of bitches, they're ashamed. They're going through this shame dynamic, and I'm not having it, right? So I called the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and I said that I wanted to place an obituary in the paper. And the way I worded it was the way I worded all the obits that I put in for John, that he died of AIDS, and that he and Gene Fedorko were partners for 23 years, and he is survived by many loving friends, and blah, blah, blah. And the woman who was taking the obit over the phone at the Post-Gazette said, oh, I don't know if we could publish an obituary like that. And I knew what she was getting at, and I said, what do you mean? And she said we would have to consult the family first. And I said, but I am family. I'm his boyfriend of 23 years. And I said, look, I'm in this organization in New York. It's called ACT UP, AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. And we demonstrate all over the country and advocate for people with AIDS. And there are about 17 pro bono lawyers in our organization, and they would love to litigate this case in particular. And she was like, oh, okay, well, let me just check with my night editor, right? So I'm on hold. She went to check with the editor, and of course they took the obituary, right? And the obituary appeared in the paper the next day, and John's brother calls me at my mom's house. How could you take it upon yourself to publish that in the Pittsburgh paper? I said, well, Eddie, you weren't doing anything. I didn't see any notices that you were putting up, and John's been dead 10 days now. What were you going to do about it? And he goes, well, we wanted the time to talk to our friends in private before we put it. I said, bullshit, Eddie. I said, you know what it is? You're ashamed. You're ashamed. You didn't want the world to know that John was gay and that John had AIDS. And that's why you didn't put anything in the paper. And I'm just not, and he denied it. He goes, no. Okay. And I don't think I've talked to the family since then. John died December the 21st, and 7 weeks later, my mom got sick, and I flew down to Pittsburgh. She died in my arms at the hospital in Pittsburgh. And those two deaths of the two people who loved me unconditionally, they were the only two people that loved me unconditionally, and they died within 7 weeks of each other. That was such a... my friends that saw me in the months after that, they didn't recognize me on the street. They said I had physically changed, that I just didn't even look like myself. And my grief was so profound and systemic that, I just walked downstairs and I'd start crying. I'd cross Fifth Avenue, I'd start crying. And those two deaths brought to the fore probably the 700 or 800 deaths of my friends and other loved ones that had happened up to that point, And I really, really, really crashed. At this time, I was running Dr. Paul Bellman's office, and he was one of the premier AIDS offices in the world, certainly in New York City. We used to open up at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd get out of there at 11 o'clock at night. But once I walked in that door, the demands on my attention were just so, I wouldn't even have time to think about my own problems, In a way, that job saved my life. And John was a magnificent, ebullious, zany, crazy individual. He taught me how to travel. He taught me how to make friends all over the world and keep them. He was just incredibly witty. And one of the last things that he said before he died was that he was always checking on me to make sure that I was going to be okay. He goes, "Look, I'm dying." He goes, "But I'm worried about you. Are you going to be okay after?" I don't know. I'll try, I think. And he made me promise two things. He said, because the Irish, they always make you do these deathbed promises. And he said, "Look, I want you to look after my niece, Mary Ellen," which I continue to do to this day. She's in Pittsburgh. "And I want you to travel like you've always wanted to travel. I want you to travel for the both of us. You've always wanted to go to Cambodia. I want you to go to Cambodia. I want you to go to Morocco." I said, yeah. He goes, "No, listen to me." He goes, "I want you to promise, And that was to really save my life in the next several years, because the travel kept me interested in going back the next year, and then the next year, and the next. It gave me something to look forward to. There was no more socializing. There was my job, and I'd come home and cry, but then I would travel. I went to Cambodia for the first time, which changed my life. I always wanted to go to Angkor Wat, and it just blew me away. The Khmer Rouge Civil War was going on. I went to Angkor Wat. There were 2 hotels, and they were both 1 star. And I pretty much had the ruins all to myself. But it turns out that Angkor Wat is based on Hindu temple architecture, which started in the south of India, in Tamil Nadu, in the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th century. So I started going to India to run a motorcycle and just explore all of that architecture. And that just became so exciting and exhilarating for me. And eventually the doctor would pay for my trips to Asia. It was like the golden parachute kind of thing. The job was very, very stressful. "Gene, you're burning out. I want to send you somewhere. Where do you want to go?" "I want to go to Burma." I can't get out of Asia these days. I really can't. I go to India every year. I'm going back next year. It'll be my 15th trip, I think, or 16th. It's very invigorating. And thanks to John. And sometimes when I'm flying over there, I see him sitting in the seat next to me, and I start crying. That he sparked this. He sparked so much in me. Yeah. Around, gee whiz, maybe it was around the late 90s, 1998, 1999, I shut down sexually, and there was just something so toxic in my mind. You have sex, you get sick. You see the patients at my office go through nightmares. My loved ones go through nightmares. Like the people that I love die. So I just shut down. I think it was like 4 years ago, I was on one of my trips to India, and I couldn't get these young guys off my back, and they were straight. And some of them wanted rupees, which was fine with me. Some of them just wanted to have fun, but they all ID'd as straight. I met this guy who owned a restaurant, and we went in the back room to have fun. Okay, and we had a great deal of fun. And I could hear him, his wife and kids, like running around upstairs, you know. He said, oh, those are my children upstairs, you know. And I said, oh, so then you're gay, you're bisexual. No. I said, but you just sucked my dick. No, I'm not gay. And that's India. I mean, they need a sexual and social revolution over there like we had over here 50 years ago. And I mean, I had so much fun that year, and I was like, wow. This is amazing, because I thought sex was over for me at age like late 60s, and I've had my fun in my youth, and I was okay with it. I'd learned to accept the loss of libido. And then all of a sudden this explosion again in India, and I thought, well, you know what, this is going to be particular to India. I'm going to get back to the States, and it's going to be the same old. But no, I came back to the States, and I think one gives off pheromones or something. I've been having a lot of fun sexually the past 4 years. But the important thing is that I broke through this ceiling of depression and shutdownism sexually, you know, and relationship-wise. I didn't even know that I was in such a depression, let alone that I could break through. The internet is brilliant. I'm so glad I lived this long. There's like a whole strata of people out there that like daddies and granddaddies. I'm also very happy to be 72 years old. If any of you out there are listening to this and you're worried like I was about, there's so much ageism in our community that when you get old, you're going to be invisible or forgotten, and young people aren't going to give a shit about you. It's, you know, you have that drummed into you as a gay man too, from within the community. You know, I'm 72 and I love it. It's really, really cute. If you're thinking of becoming 72, go for it, because it's cute. You know?
I'm making this, as you know, mostly for young gay guys of now and the future who might not have an opportunity to have this conversation with you that I'm having. I mean, is there anything that, you know, given, again, the incredibly interesting life that you've lived and in the most incredibly interesting times, is there anything that you feel like you would like to specifically impart to young gay men of now and the future?
Well, young gay men, of course, be careful. Don't get HIV and don't get Hep C, because it really kills me the way some people are indifferent about it, and you open up one of these magazines and there's this picture of this gorgeous guy rappelling up some mountain, and it's an ad for Rayataz, an HIV drug, you know. And like somebody might look at that and say, oh, I want to be like that guy, like fabulous and like rappelling up that mountain and get a boyfriend like that. It doesn't matter if I get HIV. It's so Madison Avenue. Don't do that. And then I notice a lot of men who are middle-aged. I talk to people about this now, and men that are like even seniors, and they're very, very sad because they, like I did years ago, have given up on sex. They just don't have any eroticism in their life anymore. And I tell my story, not like I want to brag, but like it's possible for things to change, because it changed for me, maybe it could change for you. And a lot of guys are very, very interested in hearing that. And I find that a lot of middle-aged guys and older guys open up to me, and they are very ashamed that they are shut down and that they are not, they absorb the ageism that's in the gay community, and they don't let themselves come out of that square trap. And they're missing out, you know. And a lot of them don't want to talk about it, and they talk about it with me for the first time. So I think that's an important, like, we don't talk about that in the gay community. If it is broached, you say, oh, that's private, leave them alone, don't ask. And I think we should be more open about the problems that middle-aged and older gay man experiences with sexual rejection and sexual compartmentalizing in our community. I think it's a huge issue, you know. And I'm always very interested in self-awareness, more self-knowledge, more catharsis, more emotional intelligence, more perspective of what I've been through, more of taking things out of the darkness and putting it on the table in the sunlight. And part of the experience of growing up gay in the 50s and 60s was not having that toolbox of identifying my feelings, my emotions. Is it shame or is it good? I like it, but is it bad? There's like all of that societal oppression, parental negativity, all of that, you know, it was just all balled up into one confusing entity for years and years and years. And it took years and years and years to separate that and to start coming out of that. And I love being 72. I love the wisdom that comes with it. I love the interests that have been ignited in me over the decades. I love living in New York. I love my friends. I love baseball. Love baseball. And so it's very, very complex, isn't it, how one's journey shapes one, you know.
Gene Fedorko, thank you.
David Weissman, you're welcome. And thanks to the crew here, too, for being so gentle and at least pretending to be interested in my narrative.